Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coping in Color, hosted by Black Mental Health Canada. And I am your host for today, Shanique Victoria Edwards, and I am super excited about the conversation that we're going to have today with Caidence. Welcome, Caidence. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is amazing. I love talking to young people. Your energy is always amazing. And so I'm really excited to hear about your story. Your accolades are beyond measure. You are 18 years old, a D1 basketball athlete. So let's just pause there for a minute for those who may not be as sports literate, including myself. Can you explain to us a little bit of, kind of what that means? I know it's a big deal, but if you can just share with us what that means to be a D1 basketball athlete.
So basically, it goes in levels, right? So there's high school, and then there's college basketball or college university basketball. And then obviously you can stay in Canada and play, but when you go to the US, there's different tiers. Like there's D1, D2, D3. And D1 is the highest tier. Like basically, in terms of like on the guy side at least, people who go to D1 basketball, after that, they can transition into the NBA or the WNBA. So
Wow. Amazing, amazing. I mean, and the accolades go on from there. Junior NBA Teamwork Award winner with Team Canada, a Team Ontario player, a Brampton Citizens Award winner, BioSteel All Canadian, just so much there, but so amazing. And, just to share with our viewers a little bit about your journey into sports, how did you get into it?
well, my family has always been like really immersed into basketball, like on both my mom's side and my dad's side. Like on my mom's side,
Mhm,
both my aunts they were involved with Team Canada as well. And then on my dad's side, they always just kind of like loved the game. So from a very
mhm,
young age, I was always like watching it and around the game. So just like, okay, I want to try this. Like I started playing soccer, but then I'm like,
mhm.
nah, I fell in love with basketball.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So your basketball took you to all the way up until that D1 level, and then you gave up a scholarship. Can you share with
Yeah,
our viewers just a little bit of kind of what that journey was like for you?
it was really hard. Probably the hardest decision I had to make in my life, but I feel like it was for the best because at that point my mental health was like steadily declining like over the past couple of
Mhm,
years, and then I felt like I kind of needed
mhm,
to change and to be home just to kind of have time to like figure out who I am and really what I want to do because I felt like I still love the game, but it just wasn't exactly for me anymore to play it.
mhm, mhm. If you don't mind us just going a little bit deeper into that decision that you had to make, and this idea of finding out who you are at such a pivotal age as well. Kind of what did that wrestle look like for you?
Well, I really had like a distant heart in mind. Like it was a battle between both of them. Like should I do this? Because I know that this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I worked literally my whole life. Everything has been dedicated to getting to this point, and now that you got here, you're giving it up. That's kind of crazy to think about, but at the same time, just
Mhm.
like what is best for me and my mental health and my safety that will allow me to be who I really want to be or who I think I want to be as I
Mhm.
progress through life. So it's just like I had to make a tough decision and think that maybe there's bigger things out there for me other than just basketball, even though this is what I've dedicated my whole life to.
That's a huge decision to make. A courageous one for sure, but definitely a huge decision to make. How did you have these conversations about wanting to step back and attend to your mental health with your family, your team, your coaches?
It was hard because at first, obviously, it's going to be a shock to everyone because it was a shock
Mhm,
to me, and it took me a while to actually like realize that this was what I wanted to do. Because in the longest time, I was like in denial about it, thinking that okay, maybe I'm not having the most fun anymore. Maybe I'm not feeling the greatest, but I still have to do this. This is still something that I think I want to do. But I think I was
mhm,
just in denial then, so it was a huge shock to everyone. But my parents and my family were very understanding, and they're very like, um, they see that mental health is like a real issue for people. So they're just like, okay,
mhm,
let's take some time. Let's think about this. Let's go back and forth. Let's weigh our options, and let's see what we can do about that. And right now, they've been nothing but supportive to me. And then when it comes to my teammate and coaches, I didn't really talk to any former teammates I had about it, but there were some teammates at the D1 level that I reached out to that were also very supportive and helping me figure out like what was best for me as well. So I appreciate them.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I hear a lot when it comes to our mental health journey is our support. The tribes that are around us that really show up our community, the people that we can go to. I'm curious about some of the language or the messaging that you received around mental health growing up. Was there any messaging about it? Was it something that was easily talked about?
There wasn't much messaging, to be honest. It was just something that I didn't really know about. It was there, like I've heard about it in passing at school, but it's not something that we ever really focused on, except for like something simple like Bella's Talk Day, where I kind of like first was introduced to mental health being something that people actually struggle with. But then at the time, I'm just like, oh, this could never happen to me because I feel okay, I feel whatever. But little did I know that it's sort of like everyone has their own mental health like struggles, but
Mhm,
obviously some can be at different magnitudes. But it also like depends, varies on person to person. But yeah, in terms of that, it was never really something that was like brought up too
mhm,
much. And because of that, I always thought that that was showing a sign of weakness in order to express your mental health and issues that you may be having. But again, that might also come from you just being a high level athlete and having to like tough through a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah.
mhm, mhm. Amazing. And going on to that, as you were mentioning, not a lot of messaging around it, kind of just centered around some of those high level days like Bell Let's Talk Day where it came up, but not necessarily having a central conversation. So then how did you know for yourself that there was a problem, that, something wasn't fitting here? How did that come about for you?
Well, there was a point where I kind of just started losing myself. Like I stopped doing things that I enjoyed. I stopped like really reaching out to people or even like interacting with my family that much, which is crazy to me because I'm a huge family person. And then at that point, I didn't really know what was going on. But then, oddly enough, like social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, like I'd see like mental
Mhm,
health posts explaining like here are some signs that you could be going through something. Where here, or I see like other people relating to things that I've been going through. So I'm just like, okay, maybe there is a problem. Maybe I do actually need to reach out for some
mhm,
help. So oddly enough, even though social media is supposed to be pinned as like a bad thing, is actually sort of what helped me figure out that I needed some help.
wow, amazing. And then from there on, understanding, okay, there was something going on here with me. I began to lose myself, lack of pleasure in things that I really enjoyed. What was your first step on this journey? What did that look after you passed up the scholarship?
Well, after I passed up the scholarship, I knew that one, I had already started like a clothing brand that I had from before then. So knew that I wanted to keep working on that as something to kind of like let my creative side flow because that's something that has kind of been suppressed for a while, like while I was in that whole funk. But then also there were just like a lot of like self-care things that I wanted to do. Like I started reading and listening to like a lot of audiobooks for self-care, self-help, just to sort of like accelerate the process, as well as like attending therapy sessions, like at least more of them to help me get on the right track, and then be more open with my
Mhm,
family, friends, people around me, just so I can kind of like push myself forward to the place that I know I want to be.
mhm, mhm. I want to go back to that comment that you made about this initial thought that if there was something going on with your mental health, that was a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that, kind of contradict with maybe your ideas of success and some of the messaging that you received around what does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be a successful athlete?
Well, as a successful athlete, again, there was this whole thing around showing no weakness, which I think is a big problem in the sport because we often forget that athletes are human too, that we have emotions, that we're
Mhm,
just like everyone else, but we're just supposed to keep trucking forward and not show any signs of weakness because apparently we have like this amazing life being like the star athletes or whatever, which is not always the truth. Like we're still people and we still need time to like process our emotions, our feelings, our physical health. There's just like a whole lot of pressure placed on student athletes, especially from a young age, that never really gets addressed because we're told to keep trucking forward, which is something that again I feel like we need to sort of like kind of shift and make a change. So there's not all this pressure on these young athletes who don't know what to do with it.
mhm, mhm. And interestingly enough, when it comes to sports, especially when it comes to basketball, um, it's predominantly a lot of Black athletes in this sport,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious about how, if there is any intersection between race and understanding about race and ideas about success and mental health. Is there any connection there or anything that you've experienced?
Nothing that I've experienced personally, but like things that I've
Mhm,
seen like throughout the world is like a lot of times when you're black, it's either like rap or go to the NBA, something silly like that,
Mhm.
where it's just like we have so much more ahead of us. Like we don't have to just be athletes. We don't just have to be musicians or performers. Like we can actually be engineers or creatives and stuff like that. So it not necessarily like happened to me specifically, but
Mhm.
being open to new ideas that okay, maybe I don't have to just play basketball because for the longest time, like my only goal was to reach the WNBA. But then I
Mhm.
realized that okay, wait, and that this was recent, like a couple months ago. I'm like, wait, I can do something else. I don't just have to be an athlete my whole life. So I think that's something that a lot of athletes may struggle with as well, not knowing like the different options and like paths that there are in life.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. And I love that you touched upon this point that there's more to us than just getting into music or getting into sports. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with either of these two
No.
pathways if you choose to go that way, but there is just so much more. And as you said, you've been working on your clothing line and, kind of finding other self-care measures for yourself. I want to tap in for a minute into the therapy, if you don't mind, as kind
Yeah.
of just talking about how did you navigate even, finding a therapist and what was that process like for you?
It did take a while to find someone good. Like my mom was definitely very helpful in the process. Like she was looking for different therapists like that, and then I would meet with some to see like how I kind of vibe. Like there's
Mhm,
no like disrespect or anything bad to the therapist that I didn't choose to go with. It's just like just the sort of vibe that I was that between us, really, that kind of led me to choose like who I went with, and then getting into it was pretty good. I felt like I needed that person to talk to, that completely like unrelated person who doesn't like have any expectations or anything of me to talk to. So it was pretty easy for me to
mhm,
just like let things go. So yeah.
absolutely. And I love the idea of like being able to have a space where there's no expectations. Like it's one thing, as you mentioned, to have your support and to have your community, but sometimes there may also still be that harboring expectation, maybe what they have of us or what we still have of ourselves,
Yeah.
and kind of working through this idea of um, I guess if I had to put it in any type of words, but reclaiming what it means to be who you are. How did that process look like for you? How did you come to terms or reconcile this idea of this is cadence outside of basketball?
That was hard. Again, that's why it took me a long time to finally figure out that maybe this is not something that I want to do anymore. Because again, I was in denial about it. And then at that point, I had already stopped doing a whole bunch of things that I loved that I had completely forgotten who I was.
Mhm,
So only recently have I started realizing that, hey, I'm Cadence and I really like to be creative. So let's see what I can do with that. Let me try to write a novel. Let me continue to build different things. Let me try to focus on my clothing brand and create because just like I am more than an athlete and I didn't really understand that until recently, until a few months ago, that I really am more than an athlete, that I have more to me than that.
mhm, mhm. And so this idea that it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and, right? You can love the sport and still have all of these different outlets for yourself as well. I'm also equally curious about, maybe some of the hardships or the barriers that you experience navigating your wellness journey.
Um, I feel like just the reaching out part, because again, I struggled with a long time thinking that I don't want to be shown as weak or someone other than who the people around me perceive me to be. So it's just like
Mhm,
I can't ask for help or I don't want to ask for help because again, I don't want to be shown seen as weak or someone else that you guys think I am. And it's just like at one point I kind of reached a mindset where I don't really care anymore. Like this has kind of gone too far now and I kind of need help. So regardless, I'm just going to go ask and see what I can do about that because there's really no reason to be fearful of what other people are thinking, to live in fear of judgment based on like what other people are thinking about you because that's their own separate lives and their own separate minds where you really got to take care
mhm,
of yourself. So
mhm,
I think that understanding that I don't need to be afraid of all that has really helped me push through some of these barriers because I feel like that was definitely the main one, just being afraid to be someone else, you know?
mhm. Perception is a big thing that
Yeah.
oftentimes limits our ability to reach out for help. And as you were saying, I knew something was going on here, but these ideas of okay, how would people view me? And this kind of leads me to my next question about your peers. Now that you've gone through this journey and you're quite vocal about your experiences and the things that you've been through, how does this kind of put you in a position to better support your peers or relate to your peers?
Well, what I really want to do is help people out and let them realize that it's okay to not be okay, as cliche as it sounds, but it really is okay
Hmm.
to not be okay. And then that it's okay to ask for help too, because we're not meant to just do everything on our own. That's not in human nature to just do everything on our own. So we really got to figure out ways to help people feel more comfortable to just be themselves and to live without fear of judgment, to be able to ask like for help, and to really realize that maybe there's people out there who do care enough that will actually help you suit through some of these things that you have going on. So those are like the main things. I really just want to help people. Like I want to start speaking at schools if that's possible, so I can kind of share my journey, and then through that, hopefully inspire other people to be okay to ask for help or come up to me with questions, or even if they have something going on, they can talk to me, someone who's like closer to their age, maybe that they may feel more comfortable with talking to. So that's I do want to help the people and help the community a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, 2 points here that I'm hearing from you is one is that there is a significant amount of stigma related to this idea of always having to be perceived as strong, doing well. But as you said, it's okay not to be okay, and normalizing that for people. I'm also quite curious about the idea of representation. I hear you saying that you want to be in schools, and for other, young kids, Black girls who may want to be in sports or want to follow your creative path ways. For you, was there, representation when you were trying to navigate this space, or was there a lack of representation, and what kind of impact did that have on your journey?
There was representation in the way that, because again, basketball is quarter like a black dominated
Hmm.
sport, so that I always
Hmm.
seen a lot of like black women's in the field
Hmm.
that I kind of looked up to and inspired to be like. But through that, we didn't really see representation in anything else. Like I didn't know that there was like Virgil Ablohs of the world who were like creative directors of Louis Vuitton and whatnot. That I could sort
Hmm.
of be like them as well, and not only just focus on basketball specifically. Even though that was something that I loved and something that I wanted to dedicate my whole life to, really. But yeah, those are some of the main things. And then along with, we had these black female athletes, but again, mental health, the stigma around it, no one really talked about it or talked about the realities of what like athletes, especially like black athletes, black female athletes, like what we go through, and how there's ways to like cope and stuff like that.
Hmm. Hmm. And as you were navigating this journey, did you have any intersections with, for example, Black mental health providers? Or do you think that would have been something that would have been beneficial to you if you did not have that intersection?
No, I didn't have the intersection, but I think that definitely would have been beneficial. Especially, it'll be beneficial at every level, from like juniors to all the way to like college athletes, because being able to have people who look like you have gone through similar journeys as you, be able to talk about things that are usually not talked about, or things that are shied away from, stigmatized, looked down upon, will really open up your eyes and ears to feel like this is something that maybe you can actually talk about, and something that's real, and not something that's just only like myth or only happens to certain people. Like this
Mhm.
happens to everyone, and being able to have like people who you look up to talk about that stuff will really impact the community in a good way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to consider mental wellness on a spectrum, right? As you're saying, and as you have said multiple times, is that it's a unique journey for each person, but it happens across a spectrum. So maybe it's not that severe form of it that maybe we pick up from media, for example. But there are different forms along the way that, if we perhaps maybe had those connections with people who did look like us, who then we could have that sense of comfort to reach out and to talk to, or for them to share with us maybe a little bit of their journey, how much better it would have been to maybe intercede a little bit earlier.
Hmm.
But kind of branching off of that as well, you are a very mature young lady, and so
Thank you.
and I think as a community we are quite resilient. But I'm kind of curious for you, where does your resilience come from?
Well, I don't know. I feel like it's something that's always been innate. I mean, I probably get it from my parents as well, because they're pretty resilient people and their families as
Mhm.
well. But it's just something that I've always had. Like, whatever I do, I want to be the best at it, or the best I can be. Like, from from doing what I'm doing with my clothing brand, from playing basketball, from even in my self-care journey, I want to try to be the best at that and try to get everything that I can do, so my resilience, I don't know exactly where it comes from necessarily, but I just know that it's something that I've always had in me since I was a little girl. Like I always just find ways to push through
Hmm.
and to look on the brighter side. Probably just knowing that there's bigger things for me out there.
Hmm.
There's just bigger things out there in general, which is what helps me like push through the tough times.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that happens when we are trying to manage our mental health is that it can kind of etch away at our resilience, almost like a chisel with at an ice cube. It starts to etch away at that a little bit. And I'm hearing you say that mindset is a significant protective factor, sorry, for you when it comes to maintaining your resilience. Are there other protective factors that you have come across along your journey that has been helpful?
Again, I think something like recent for me is just like reaching out and being a bit more open to those to your loved ones and those around you. But other than that, mindset was really just the biggest thing. But even
Mhm,
in that point, like there's times where I wouldn't want to get up out of bed, or I wouldn't want to
mhm,
give my all in my schoolwork because I was just so tired and not feeling like okay. So there's times where I did let it get the best of me, but eventually I was able to push through because there are definitely ups and downs. Like mental health and healing isn't like a linear journey. Like there's ups and downs. So there will be days where you're feeling on top of the world. Then those there will be days where you're feeling underneath it. Really, so there were ups and downs, and just like capitalizing on those highs and trying to remember those good
mhm.
days. It's kind of something that helped me go get through it.
Absolutely. And it's something that I bring into my own practice is I always like to liken this journey to sometimes like a game of snakes and ladders, right? You have
Mm,
that ladder and everything is going really, really well, but then some days you get onto that square that there's that snake and you're coming back down, but that doesn't mean that you failed. That just means that, we just got to keep on working at this. How do you reconcile the concept of failure in the grand scheme of mental wellness?
that's difficult because again, I feel like I've always been afraid of failure, and that's something that I've always only realized
Mhm.
recently, like through my efforts to get better. Because again, I never really like understood that, and that's why I always push so hard. But like when it comes to mental health and feeling, again, I just try to realize that there's gonna be good days and bad days, and then you just have to be lenient with yourself as if you're talking to a friend. Because a lot of times when we
Mhm.
talk to ourselves, it's just we're putting all these negative thoughts in our mind, like, oh, I'm not doing enough, oh, I suck, this and that. But you never talk to a friend that way. So it's just like you got to kind of put it in perspective and give yourself some leniency and understand that, okay, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. And on the bad days, sometimes all you need is some little extra love, not a little, not more hate, not more
Mhm.
negativity.
Absolutely. The self-compassion is such a big part of that. I heard you bring up the idea of, this wellness journey helped you get to a place where you were beginning to prioritize things for you that were important for self-care. Did you have any type of, narrative around self-care before kind of getting to this point? And how did you, kind of work in or begin to bring in more self-care into your wellness journey?
Well, before when I heard self care, all I would think about is just like basically what I've seen on TV, like spa days and stuff like that. So I'm just like, what really is self care? And then like through my journey in like therapy and uh
Mhm,
again just working on my own self care, I've realized that it can really be anything that you want it to be. Just like mindfulness, mindfulness doesn't just have to be meditation. Mindfulness can be
mhm,
as simple as spending time with family or loved ones, or journaling, reading, just doing something that brings you into the present. So that's the same thing with self care. You just have to find what works for you. Really, like for me, sometimes self care is as simple as taking a moment, deconnecting, and maybe building some Lego because that kind of like brings me into the present and brings me back to the things that I loved when I was younger. So self care can really be whatever you make it. You just have to take some time to figure out what works for you.
absolutely. I always liken it to what allows you to have fun, because that's really what it's about,
Yeah.
right? There's so many different pressures around us all the time that what we really need sometimes just to get ourselves rebalanced, refocused, re-energized is just to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Like
So do you find that you're getting back on the courts now that you've kind of been working through this journey? Is that still something that draws to you?
getting back to playing basketball, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, on Tuesday I was actually in a women's league because oddly enough, in this small town that I'm living in, there's a Shelburne women's basketball league. So I got invited out to that, and I actually went, and it was fun. Definitely a bit out of shape, but it was pretty cool. And I still have like my skills, obviously, because that's just not gonna fall out the
Amazing.
way. So definitely, I would be open to just playing for fun, going to some runs, even
Mhm,
with some old teammates. I would definitely do that. So because I still love the game, I still watch the game, but it's just playing it at that high level is just something that I'm not necessarily into as much, but
mhm.
just playing it in general just for fun, that's definitely something that I would do.
Amazing, amazing. And I mean, as you were saying before too, wellness is not a linear pathway. Healing is not a linear pathway. How do you define healing for yourself on this journey?
I say giving myself time and grace because a lot of times I'm very like hard on myself when it comes to healing. So I'm still trying to figure out ways to allow myself that time and that like that space to like know
Mhm,
that there's gonna be the ups and downs like I've said before and really just accept that and figure out how to deal with them and how to cope in like helpful ways. So it's taken a while and I'm still working through it, but it's definitely something that I'm learning how to manage along the way.
mhm. Amazing. We are going to take a really brief break, but we will be back shortly with some more from Cadence. Thank you so much for this conversation so
Yeah,
far,
no
and I look
problem.
forward to picking up after this short break. We'll be right back.
Yep.
Coping in color, coping in color, coping in color, coping in color.
Welcome back, everyone. And we are back with Cadence, D1 basketball athlete who is on her journey to mental wellness. And we've been having a really great conversation up until this point about her journey, about success and healing. One of the things I wanted to pick up on before we get to questions and things like that from our audience. So we hope that everyone will come prepared to really ask some great questions of Cadence is this idea of perhaps having better supports in place or even education about mental health in school. I mean, you're still fairly young. I'm sure you can recall your high school and junior school experiences probably a lot better than me. um, but around just this idea of psychoeducation, what would have that have done for you? How do you think that would have impacted you on your journey if there was a little bit more education, and what could that education look like?
I actually wrote something about this, like a mini essay about this, because I feel like this is a very important topic because it starts with the education about it, and that's how we
Mm,
like sort of like work to destigmatize mental health and whatnot. So for me, it would have helped a lot. I feel like it would have made me realize that it's okay to get help much earlier than I did,
mhm,
and I feel like it would have made me more open with my feelings and talking and knowing that it's okay not to be okay again, and that it's okay that it's not a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of strength to show that you do need some help and that your mental health is a real thing. So
mhm,
in schools, I feel like we can start it like very early on, putting in like lessons about mental health and giving people leniency, like maybe scheduling, maybe allowing each kid like a mental health day, or that may be doing a lot, but just something simple to start out with, where we really start talking about the effects that it has on both like the area, the community, the people itself, and then being able to work forward with that. Because if we start young, well, the kids, the new future, the youth, they're the future. So if we start young, they'll be able to grow up and work towards making this world a better place in terms of mental health and destigmatizing it and making it more acceptable and something that's not as looked down upon, because they're the ones who grew up learning about it.
Mhm.
So change will essentially start with them, which is why I think that we need to get it going in schools a lot earlier than we do, or just getting it
Mhm.
going in schools in general, because we never actually talked about it much except for something one off day like Bell Let's Talk Day. That's like really the only time we ever talked about mental health.
Absolutely. And I mean, even as you were sharing, some of the things that you picked up and that you actually got off of social media was this idea of like, okay, I'm not enjoying doing the things that I used to do. My studies are kind of going by the wayside. I'm procrastinating. And sometimes when I, work with students and I ask them, what do your study habits look like? And I tell them, procrastination is a sign, perhaps sometimes there's some people who are just natural procrastinators. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
finding that it's, a lot more, that might be a sign that something might be going on there if you're isolating yourself. So what I'm hearing from you is that, conversations about it, but also conversations about what does it look like? What may it look like for our age group? Because for adults versus, younger kids, it may come across looking quite different.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a bit harder to put it in place for people that are a bit older, because there's not as many like systems, which is why I think that public figures are a big help, like
Mhm.
celebrities, athletes, just people that we put on like this pedestal, even though
Mhm.
sometimes not maybe be for like the best reasons, but people we put on this pedestal, having them start the conversation and talking about it will get people that look up on them, like adults and young adults and even youth as well, to realize that hey, it's okay to really talk about these things, because these people that are so high that we may like regard as like these otherworldly figures, they're just human too, and then they are actually talking about these problems and saying that we actually need to talk about it. So I feel like that's one way that we can really work on this for people in sort of like older age groups, because again, it's hard to
Mhm.
put systems in place when people are not necessarily in school. But
Mhm.
doing that, and then leniency in the workplace as well, like having again maybe those scheduled mental health days for some people, or even having a few workshops where you talk about mental health to make sure that all your employees are doing well and doing okay, just checking, just basic check-ins and stuff like that. So
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that comes up a lot is this generational gap when it comes to mental health, and the idea that, maybe sometimes the older generation doesn't have a strong awareness or language around mental health and what it means to be on this journey of mental wellness. Has conversations about mental health kind of changed when it comes to, the conversations you might be having with your parents or other adults? Have you noticed that it has changed now that you have been more empowered, I would say, on your journey?
yeah, I think so. It's definitely made like the people around me like more understanding of it, because
Mhm.
again, like a lot of times our parents don't really like talk about that stuff, because again, the generational gap. So it's just like, how do we find a way to get this more involved? Well, you can start with the children. You can start with the
Mhm.
children and have them like really reach out and try to talk to their parents about this. Sometimes they may not always be receptive, and that's okay, because you're not going to be able to like change everyone or alter the perspectives of everyone. But just getting that conversation going can really help, and try to make everything more inclusive and try to sort of close that gap. Like it's impossible to fully close it, because that's just like how the timeline and age gaps work. But
Mhm.
at the same
Mhm.
time, if we can like just try to lessen it through the children, having them talk about it, and then maybe share those things with their parents. You can go back and
Mhm.
maybe talk about things with their parents as well. Like maybe we can sort of start that cycle.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I would like to just kind of do a little bit of deeper dive about your navigation through psychotherapy, just for those who may be listening, who be thinking, okay, maybe I want to do this, but I'm not even sure of like what's included or what's entailed. If you can maybe just give us some tidbits of some, some high level things that you've walked away with, maybe some tools or things that you've
Mm-hmm.
found have been very helpful for your journey.
Well, there's different types of therapies. That's one thing that I learned recently. Like actually, right now I'm in musical therapy. So sometimes my therapist, depending on like how the session is going, like she'll start playing some music and saying some like good words, mantras, um, just stuff like that to kind of like put me in a calmer spot to allow
Mhm.
me to think more clearly. So that's something that really helps, that I've taken away, that music can actually be therapy for someone instead of just being something that, oh, you're listening to music in class. No, you can't do that. Just like this actually sort of calms you down. This is my therapy.
Mhm.
And then there's also tools and different resources that I've learned, mostly just like good habits in the terms of, I forgot the word, but things you say to yourself over and over
Mhm.
again. Like I have a whole bunch of sticky notes on my mirror and plastered around my room with like good sayings, just so
Mhm.
I can sort of like read those in the morning and just kind of like try to get into this good headspace, because that's something that's very important, is just start your day off not thinking negatively, but sort of having those positive mantras and words around you.
Absolutely. In regards to just the different forms of therapy, I think that I love that you brought up that point because a lot of people don't know that. They think that, okay, I just have to sit down and talk to somebody and share all of my problems when no, there's so many. There's music therapy, there's art therapy, there's play therapy, there's just so many different forms. There's group therapy
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I love the idea of positive affirmations as a way of kind of ushering into the day in a proper headspace. And this kind of ties me into a little bit of the connection between the physical and the mental health. And how, for you, as an athlete, I'm sure you exercised and had to have a strict diet. But in regards to just the connection between our physical and our mental health, did you find that as you were navigating this journey that because of one, the other one was lapsing, or vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of hard to do it directly, but because I had like practice every day, so I need to show up and be my best like every day. But it's difficult when my mental health is suffering to kind of be in
Hmm.
this space to run as hard as I can, to jump as hard as I can, to be like communicative and actually talk to my players, because I'm the point guard. I'm supposed to be one of the leaders of the team. But as my mental health was suffering, like I didn't want to talk to people in general outside of basketball, so it's hard to talk to people and be a leader inside of the sport too, which kind of
Hmm.
was annoying for me, because I realized that I'm not being the best that I can be, that I need to be for my team and my teammates, because I'm suffering with one end. So just like I need a way to figure this out. So it definitely affects it, especially when you get into things like not wanting to get out of bed, not eating as much. Like that definitely affects your physical health as well, which is something that you definitely need to watch and be mindful of.
Absolutely. Storytelling is such an impactful way of reducing stigma, for opening up access and awareness about mental health. And as you're saying, you really want to, not only through your clothing line, but just through your own personal voice, be able to bring your experience to other people. I'm curious about, have you always been that way where you've always wanted to kind of share your stories, or was this kind of like a new voice for you as you've gone through this journey?
Honestly, I've always been pretty introverted growing up. Like I
Mm.
did have like some moments where I would like speak up and just be myself, but I've always been pretty introverted. So honestly, I feel like this is something new that I'm stepping into, but it's something that
Mhm.
I always sort of had inside of me, if that makes any sense. Because
Mhm.
I don't know, I feel much more willing to share my story just because of this like this need and this innate desire I have
Mhm.
to help other people, especially based on what I went through. I don't want other people to like have to suffer like I did, but if they do,
Mhm.
I want to help them find ways to cope and manage through it. So yeah, I feel like this is something I'm stepping into now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love the fact that you pulled out, it was just something that was always in me, right? And perhaps, sometimes we go through things and our ideas of what life should look like and success do shift, but we find something else that's equally amazing within us in the
Hmm.
process.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you're having those moments when you're, kind of, if we're going to take it back to this idea of the ebbs and the flows, or the snakes and the ladders, and let's just say, there's a day when you hit onto a snake and we're kind of going a little bit down again. What for you are kind of the initial steps that you take to recognize that, and then to attend to yourself to get yourself back up that ladder?
I feel like I'm pretty attuned into my emotions, especially despite the fact that at first I necessarily wasn't or didn't want to speak about it. But so I'm sort of able to realize right away when I'm not being as productive as I should be, or not doing necessarily what I need to be successful. But like literally last week was one of those snake days or snake weeks for me, actually.
Mm.
But I sort of just allowed myself to Just okay, I'm gonna lie in bed for a couple days. I just needed this. There's no specific reason why, but I just
Mhm.
needed this in order to come on this podcast and do stuff like this and attach be successful and share my story and to try to like progress my learnings and whatnot. So sometimes you just need to like allow yourself to have those days, to have those weeks. And something that helped for me as well was actually like sharing. Like sometimes I went to my parents and to my sister, my brother, and just be like, today's just one of those weeks. Like I don't feel like doing anything. And then to me, they're
Mhm.
just reassuring. They're like, it's okay. Sometimes you need those weeks. It's good. It's okay. And that really
Mhm.
helped me get through it and to realize that it's really okay to have those days, to have those weeks, and just know that there's going to be a brighter side once you get out of it.
Absolutely. And I love that. I think young or old, we all need to take a moment and give ourselves permission sometimes, with
Yeah.
all of the different pressures around us and the things that we have to accomplish, the things we want to do, the things people expect us to do. Sometimes it's really hard to give ourselves permission to pause, to rest, to stay in bed those extra couple days if we need to.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess if, kind of to think about this brighter future that you've mentioned, if you had to give us kind of your holy grail dream, if, I guess in therapy we call it the miracle question. If everything was to go perfectly and amazing tomorrow morning for you, what would that look like?
I'm basically living it right now, to be
Oh,
honest. Like, I'm working on myself and I'm working on my brand because, in general, like, in the end, I want to be a creative director of my own brand or of like
mhm,
another big brand, just like Virgil was. And I want to be able to
mhm.
like share my creativity with the world while also spreading like positive and helpful messages to people. So, I'm on my journey and pathway right now. So, each day, like tomorrow, next week, each day brings a new opportunity for me to get closer to that goal, which is what I cherish. So even though I do have those down weeks, I know that maybe tomorrow is going to be a day where I can just help myself get closer to this goal, or maybe those down weeks are something that I needed to also help me get close to this goal, just in like a nice reset, you know. So I'm kind of living it right now in the sense that every day is a new day for me to get up and to sort of work towards that end goal.
I absolutely love your response to that because I think sometimes we do think that this miracle question means that, like, all of these things have come to a realization. But as you said, this is a journey. So every morning that you have the opportunity to get yourself one step, just that one step, and then the next step to that journey or to the fulfillment of that journey, you're already on your way. So I loved that you said that. That's so, I mean, I'm walking away feeling like, whoa, like I need to take that tidbit. So I hope you don't mind that I'm going to
Yeah,
take
of
that for
course, of course,
myself.
of course.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
But I mean, even if we had to put that to, what is your hope when it comes to this next generation and the resources that is put towards supporting their mental health? I mean, if you had to say anything to, for example, government or service providers, what would that be?
Maybe making it more accessible because at the same time, as much as the resources that are out there, it's not always accessible or known to people. Because I just found out the other day that there's actually like a service in Toronto that people can like walk into if they ever need
Mhm.
like aid, like mental health aid and whatnot. And I didn't know that before. Like obviously I don't live in Toronto, but it still would have been nice to know that there's different types of services for people to get aid. And again, just making it more accessible because a lot of times it's hard to get into therapy. There's a wait list, and then like the pricing of it is absolutely ridiculous. And like it makes sense because it's a tough job, but at the same time, a lot of people can't afford this, especially people like maybe in lower income housing who may need it
Mhm.
more sometimes. Like they can't afford the therapy, so sometimes they're just left with their own thoughts. So maybe just adding stuff in the schools, in workplaces to sort of like get people the proper aid, whether it be like more groups or just more workshops in general. I feel like workshops could really be something that could be helpful for all ages, really.
Absolutely. And, I think as you're saying that accessibility point, not only is it the price point, but also this, as you're going back to this idea of just knowledge and awareness, like you don't know what you don't know. So it's
Mhm.
having to put it out there. But, in regards to maybe people like me who is like, how do we reach young people? Okay, the schools understandable. But are there other avenues that you could perhaps suggest that we can utilize as a way of really kind of reaching out to young people to bring about awareness and to highlight the services that may be out there, especially for like, Black youth?
Well, at first, I guess you could kind of like figure out where these youth usually like congregate. Like one, you could start with sports because again, there's a lot of Black youth in sports. So putting people in place to go talk to people or talk to the children that are in sports might be a good start. Or using things that the youth do, usually like the social media platforms, like something like
Mhm,
TikTok, as a helpful resource to make content to let people know that there is services and things available for people to get help. But again, I do think entering different avenues, whether it be like extracurriculars in different like teams or groups around the area, might be good to try to get into there and infiltrate that and try to sort of um, get your teachings and what you really want to say and
mhm,
like your aid out to the kids in those situations.
mhm. Great points. And I'm hoping that if anybody here who's working as a service provider, me included, or in government, we're listening to these things because I think this is really important that not only are we hearing your voices, but we're putting them into action as well to really help to make that change as well. I've heard you speak a lot about your business, and I think maybe not only myself, but our listeners and our viewers may be quite interested in kind of what is your brand, what is your clothing line, what does it do?
Mhm. Well, my clothing brand is called Quietconscience, and I think I sort of had the
Mhm,
idea for it in June. Yeah, I think it was June, but I didn't really work on it much until I came back home. But really, what the name is supposed to suggest is that quiet conscious is like a middle ground, a peace of mind where there's no
mhm,
like back and forth between different personas or thoughts in your head, where you finally found like this innate and total peace. So that's something that I really want to focus on because for me, again, I had a lot of struggle going back and forth between my mind and like different thoughts and like different things when I was trying to make the decision to like stop playing my sport. But then eventually when I
mhm,
did and I came home, I sort of found like I had a quiet conscious moment where I sort of found that total peace. Like obviously there's gonna be ups and downs in it, but yeah, I did have that moment. And then in terms of like the clothing line, I really just try to express myself through my clothing. Like the first piece that I made was during that time of much inner turmoil. So the piece sort of reflects that and I like to tell that story through the garment and when I'm actually like sharing the piece to like sort of like so people can understand who I am and what this brand is really about. Like I'm trying to create a safe space for people to sort of just be themselves and again to live without fear of judgment because a lot of time that fear of judgment is maybe what stops people from like reaching out to ask for help or just being themselves, which is a part of suppression, which can lead to other things. And I really just want to find a way, maybe not to fully solve that because it's hard to solve a lot of things, especially just like starting now, but at least to reduce it and give people like the space they need.
mhm. I love to hear the work that you're doing. This is so amazing. I love the idea of even quiet conscience. Oh my goodness, you're leaving me with just so much as well, because I think it's something that we can all relate to, right? This idea that we've had this moment of back and forth and of turmoil and just trying to make sense of the world around us in light of maybe our own traumas or griefs and things that may arise, that it's that moment of quiet conscience that begins to spark that new light
Yeah.
in us.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that, and I love the idea of doing storytelling through your garments, because I think that's a way of going back to this idea that you don't need to feel kind of confined to a
Mm-hmm.
box of how to be and how to do. Because I mean, this is the first time I ever even made that connection between clothing and storytelling. But
Yeah.
when I think about, who inspires you, Virgil, that's all he did, was he told stories through his clothing. So that is
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Yes. Thank
Amazing.
you.
We have a couple of minutes left, so I do want to open it up to see if anybody may have any questions for us from the audience, or not for us, um, but for Cadence. But feel free to let us know if there's any questions, and our team will also let us know if there's any questions coming on any of the other platforms that we have. But I mean, like in the interim, uh, you've mentioned, that you live in a bit of a small town, and that one of the things that for you, when we think about how we can better support young people, is through access. Um, you know, still fairly young, I know, and maybe just fairly new on your journey. But is there anything that right now in this space of mental health that we're doing well that you would like us, to see more of?
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, there's things to grow. There's a lot of things that we are doing well, and I feel like that comes from just more the awareness that we're putting onto it, whether it be like from people like Kevin Love or Murder Rose and high level athletes
Mhm.
speaking out into initiatives for people to like sort of get into this, or again, not necessarily during my time in school, but maybe starting in younger ages, maybe they're putting in more things in place to actually help talk about this, because I have seen like more things online where people
Mhm.
are getting into mental health and talking about it more and allowing some more like leniency. Like I know in my mom's workplace, like they allow mental health days. So I think that that's something that's like a big push. So just sort of bringing more awareness to it and letting people know that it's not a bad thing at all. It's just it happens to a bunch of us, and we need to recognize how we can help people out. So and I feel like we're doing a decent job with that. It's not bad, and we just need to keep pushing it and keep letting it grow in that way.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think I have one, kind of other question. It's kind of going a little bit of a different direction. But when I think about working with young people and just the impact that maybe virtual therapy might have, and I don't know within your journey if it was, primarily a virtual experience or have you had the in-person experience, and if you've had both, kind of your perspectives on that.
I've had a bit of both, mostly online though, and I really like online because like it allows
Mhm.
me to do it anywhere. Like in high school, playing basketball at a prep school, I was in London, Ontario, and I can't drive, and there's like no way to get me from place to place. So being able to do it online was a very big help, especially during those times where I felt like I was really in need of someone to talk to. So I feel like online definitely helps a lot. But then in person is pretty good too. I haven't done it too much, so I can't speak about it that much, but I
Mhm.
can say one thing that I think that we need to start looking to incorporate more like therapy groups, just in sort of
Mhm.
ways that people have like groups for other issues where it might be like substance abuse and stuff like that. I think having groups for mental health is really good because I was actually part of one for a bit, and it helped me realize that I truly am not alone, despite how lonely it may
Mhm.
feel in this. Like there's other people going through similar situations, and I feel like I want to help them out just as they want to help me out. And I feel like having groups is just very important. Like at first, it may seem hard to share or may seem a bit awkward, but as you go on in it, I feel like it's very helpful. So I feel like that's something that we should start doing more of. Like,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I definitely do appreciate the ideas of group because it comes back to this idea of community and how important community is for just our wellness in general. And so this idea that I'm not alone at all, and it also makes me think about like our circles and our tribes in the sense of, as you've navigated this journey, have you noticed that either your community, the people who build you up, has become bigger or has it become smaller? What does that look like for you?
um, it sort of becomes smaller, but I feel like that's a conscious choice because really, I
Mm-hmm.
never really had like too many people like other than my family around me in the first place. So kind of just pushing myself away from the sport has obviously made that a bit smaller because I'm not around these people like every day constantly. And again, being on a gap year, I'm more so on my own, but I am finding some people around here who I do trust and who I am able to like talk to about certain things. And I appreciate them wholly for that. Because really you don't need a big group around you. You just need to find like a couple people that'll be solid and hold you down as
Mm-hmm.
you will them. And you
Mm-hmm.
should be good with that.
Absolutely. I think, as you're saying that too, is this idea that it was a conscious choice, going back to this idea of, just having that quiet conscious moment
Yeah.
to really reflect on, you know, not to say that there's anything good or bad, right or wrong about the relationships, but, how are they serving me right now? I will say, Caden said some of our viewers are saying that they can't hear you so clearly. So maybe for this last, couple minutes, if you could just be um,
Yeah.
a little bit louder. I apologize, I didn't pick that up before, but hopefully you were able to fully capture a lot of what Cadence had to say, because it was absolutely impactful, just, not just for me, but I hopefully for everybody who was listening. But I guess if you had to kind of leave us with some lasting parting words, and maybe if people want to connect with you in regards to maybe how you can come and support, either a sports team or come speak to a school, also where could they find you?
Well, right now I'd say, well, before I leave my words, I'd say right now you could probably find me on Instagram, kstar23. You can reach out to me there, and then I can provide you with my email, and then we can sort of just talk and get some things going. Whether that be like if you just need someone to talk to, or if there's like opportunities in place, like that'd be a great place to start. And as for lasting words, I'd say live without fear of judgment, because a lot of times that's what hinders us from from reaching our true potentials, from asking for help, from being who we want to be, because we're always too worried about how other people perceive us or how we want to be. And again, that's something that I struggled with for a long time. But realizing that, okay, I don't really need to worry about what these other people are thinking. Just live without fear of judgment and not be afraid to just be myself. That's helped me a lot. It's helped me ask for help. It's helped me find new avenues to take part on, and to really just connect and just get back to being myself.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Cadence, for this conversation. I wish you, the most success on your journey. You're already there, as you mentioned. You're already living your dream. But I do hope, in walking away, I know I'm leaving with a lot of tidbits, but this idea of, being able to just live your life to the fullest without any fear of judgment, and kind of learning to find those moments of quiet conscience when you can just become more in tune with yourself and with who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
even more so is prioritizing yourself, your mental wellness, and
Yeah.
recognizing those signs and those symptoms. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who listened in today as well, and we look forward to seeing you again at another episode of Coping in Color.
Yeah, of
Take care.
course. Thank you for having me.